What is going on, y'all? It's your boy Ollie Buddy, man. We got UCL quarterfinal predictions. Without further ado, let's just get into them. All right, let's start with Arsenal and Sporting. I think for most of us, Arsenal wins this, right? And obviously, Arsenal have not been in the best form lately. But when you're talking about the main actor in this game, I think Arsenal is that, right? And yeah, they're coming off a loss to Southampton. They're coming off a Carabao Cup final loss out of two cup competitions when really a lot of us had them winning the quadruple. At least I had them contenders for the quadruple, right? At least a treble, right? When are you ever saying that about a team? At least a treble, like rarely. But that's the potential of this team, right? That's how far they could have went. I think when you look at how Arsenal is built, right, the way they play, they're just a nightmare, not only for smaller teams, but really they're a nightmare for bigger teams, right? And I think a lot of people think of Arsenal as, taking these mid-table strategies that, oh, you're such a great low block team, or you can defend better, you can score on these set pieces and defend compactly. That's what the, mid-table and lower teams, that's how they play against versus the big teams in their domestic leagues, right? But Arsenal is the ultimate version of this approach, right? So when you take this up to Europe against any team in the quarterfinal is a big team. Yes, Sporting, maybe the smallest of the bunch, but still, it's Sporting, right? When you look at how Arsenal play, I think it's very tough for Sporting to come away with much here. I could see a draw in a world, I really could, but it'll still be very tough. I think, when you think about Sporting, especially, actually when you think about the history of these two teams, right? They were up against each other in that Europa League quarterfinal all those years ago. Not all those years ago. I think it was 3 or 2 years, or maybe 4 years ago. It was 2023, I think. And then Sporting went to the Emirates and knocked Arsenal out on pens, and that was back when they had Ruben Amorim, right? And then ever since then, Gyökeres joined the team, and then Amorim left, and obviously Rui Borges is now Sporting manager, and Gyökeres is on Arsenal. Funny enough, and that's also another subplot to this. But when you look at that, and then you see how much those teams have grown, and now it feels like Arsenal are in this final form of themselves, and a lot of the guys who were at Sporting then aren't necessarily there now. But I think of the young guys like not Trincao, sorry, Ignacio, Diomande, right? Morita, I think, was still there though, and like there's still some continuity there, but also a lot of the young guys have grown into very solid players at bare minimum, right? Especially when you think of Diomande and Ignacio, who are two highly touted defender prospects for the big clubs in Europe, but they've stayed at Sporting so much that they've developed into this really, really good defender of themselves. So, and you also think about how they play. Rui Borja has to set them up very well. I remember Sporting, especially against the performance against Bayern. They did lose to Bayern, but they were very, very impressive in the first like half of that game. And hey, if you can do it against Bayern for 45 minutes, who's to say you can't do it for Arsenal? Like there's a chance, and a good 45 minutes can take you a long way. But again, the game is 90 minutes, so as long as your next 45 minutes aren't bad, then you'll have some success. But I digress. I think at the end of the day, and we also talked about Gyökeres, right? Gyökeres going back against his old team. I think there's something to be said about ex players trying to perform like better, or their best. And obviously, you would imagine any ex player performs their best, but not ex player, but any player performs their best. But especially when you go up against your old team, there's something extra there. And I think Gyökeres, especially, going up against practice against an Ignacio and Diomande, those are the guys you're practicing day in, day out for years, right? So going back to that, how they play, their tendencies, and they also know your tendencies as well. But you could see Gyökeres finding some success there. Overall, and we could also talk about injuries. There's so many things to talk about with Arsenal, right? Talk about injuries, but I actually throw that to the side because Arsenal, through this transfer window and through their last however many, they've built two really good teams. So if someone's out, someone else can back them up. Like, I'm not worried about that. Trossard out, Saka out. You have Madueke, you have Martinelli. However you feel about them, they're not that much better or worse than the options that are in front of them, right? So, with that being said, give me Arsenal to win. I think it'll be tough, but I think even with all their, offensive struggles and how pedestrian they look going forward and some bad results, I think at the end of the day, they're a better team than Sporting. So they should win this game. Give me 2-1 Arsenal first leg. And Arsenal will also go through in the tie, but we'll get to that next week. All right, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich at the Bernabeu. I'm going to be frank here. I think Bayern Munich are about to put the biggest belt to A we have seen to Real Madrid in a minute. And I know Barcelona have been spanking Real Madrid for the last 2 years. But on the European stage, Arsenal did win, I think, 3-0, right, last year. But I think it could get worse. It could genuinely get worse. Now, for this game in particular, I think Madrid will somehow keep it a little bit close. It is the Bernabeu after all. Well, we did say that last year versus Arsenal, but it is still a Bernabeu, and I think Madrid are starting to find some inkling of success. But I think when you look at Real Madrid, I think the problem is that they just don't play like a team, right? And they did play like a team versus City, right? I have to give them their credit, but the reason they played like a team is because they took out some stars. And sometimes you have to sacrifice individual brilliance to get more out of your team, right? The thing is, now those stars are healthy. Are you willing to sacrifice Alvaro Arbeloa? Are you willing to sacrifice putting Mbappe on the bench, putting Jude on the bench, Vinny on the bench? Because when they're on the field, they're not gonna play like a team, right? Mbappe, I saw Mbappe's interview today. He said he doesn't run. That's not what he does, right? Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to have non-runners on your field versus Bayern? I just don't see. I don't see how that's a recipe for success. I really don't think so. Now, the good thing for Real Madrid is that I think this sort of style matchup plays into their hands. Bayern are going to have the ball more than them. Bayern are going to push into their final third. They're going to leave space in behind in attempting to dominate you and press you into your half. And for a guy, for a team that has Vinicius and Mbappe and Valverde, right? And then you can also have Goulet and Tchouameni who can sometimes hit those long passes. I think that's gonna be some places of opportunity, maybe to get something out of this game, right? But man, I just can't bring myself to see it, because like I said, Bayern is so dominant. When you look at the body of work Bayern Munich has built from since August, it's incredible. Lucho Diaz is on fire, best season of his career. Gnabry, it's like revived. Gnabry's revived, man. Harry Kane, Ballon d'Or frontrunner, right? And then obviously Michael Olise, arguably the best right winger in the world. Incredible, assist magnet, right? And it doesn't even talk. That's just the front four, right? We're not even talking about the back line. Upamecano and Toss, so relaxed, so assured back there. Neuer is not his best year, and I think you can start to see the decline in Neuer. I think also with the way Bayern Munich play, he doesn't have to make a lot of saves. And so really that means all the saves he makes are big ones, but if you look at his stats, he's not saving them as much as maybe he should. But again, you also have a great back line back there. It's like Limer's back there, Tom Bischoff is back there, Guerrero if he's fit, Stanisic, like all these guys, right? So I say all this to say Bayern Munich is a very robust team. And did I speak about the midfield, Kimmich and Pavlovic, right? So very robust team. Goretzka off the bench. They're complete, they're a big team, and they have individual brilliance as well. And they don't have to sacrifice, right? And I didn't even talk about Musiala maybe coming back in, right? So, like, you have Gnabry on the field, you have Olise, you have Harry Kane, you have Lucho Diaz, individual brilliance. But these guys also run so hard for their team. They run at you, they run through you, they'll run by you, right? So all of this to say, can Madrid handle that? And I didn't even mention Courtois is out for Madrid. Courtois is out for Madrid. For me, Courtois is the best keeper in the world. Courtois has saved Real Madrid so many times, right? Courtois, literally, if Real Madrid did not have Courtois, I think they'd be a joke. They'd be even more of a joke than last year. But Courtois saved their behind so many times. But now he's out, he's injured. Lunin comes in, and Lunin was a great keeper, obviously, when they won the UCL 2 years ago. Lunin was a huge, huge factor in that. But even that shows you how good Courtois is, because even though Lunin had all of that success last year in the UCL, for the final, Courtois just recovered from injury, and they still put Courtois in the final, because that's how good Courtois is. That's the gap, right? Lunin's young. We'll see, how much he's improved since then. But I find it hard to believe when Harry Kane and Olise and Diaz and Pavlovic and Kimmich and Musiala and Nabry are all raining shots down on you? Are you gonna save all of those, right? I just don't see it, man. It'll be something very special for Madrid to get past Bayern, and I just do not think it'll happen. I think Bayern have too much ammo, they're too complete, and Real Madrid, even though they've been better, they are nowhere near the type of team of Bayern. They can't cover ground like Bayern. They can't attack like Bayern, and they can't defend like Bayern. The proof is in the pudding, guys. Give me Bayern Munich to win. I'm gonna keep it respectful, a respectful 3-1. You know, it'll be deflating for Madrid, but it won't be humiliating. At least in terms of the score, it might be humiliating in terms of performance. I'm talking total domination. That's what I expect from Bayern. You know, what I expected City to do to Real Madrid last round, I expect Bayern to double that. All right, PSG and Liverpool, and I think this game is it's a little bit deeper than people are gonna think because yes, Liverpool are not in a great spot. Obviously, they just took four to the face from Manchester City. They're I think sixth in the Prem. Uh, Salah's fallen off a cliff. Van Dijk not great anymore. So like when you look at Liverpool's situation, and we didn't talk about Isak being injured or Verts, Kirkez, like their transfers outside of Ekatike, not really. Their transfers are not really up to the level that they thought they would be. And then you put in, you know, Allison is out. Now you're like, whoa, what is Liverpool even gonna do? They're gonna show up and get battered, right? Why are Liverpool even showing up? I've seen that, but I think there's a lot of just subplots here that I think are actually in Liverpool's favor. And the way that Arne Slot has built Liverpool, I think it's really PSG esque, right? And especially with their recent transfer window, he wanted to go for more speedy attackers that look like Barcola and Dembele and Doué, like these techie and fast, right? Efficient attackers that will run for their team. Like that is what Ekatike is. That is what Isak is, right? Even guys like Frimpong and Verts, like those guys follow kind of that mold, right? I think all of that is actually going to play into Liverpool's favor because the profiles of their squad, I think, work very well in terms of harming PSG, and it'll also depend on what Arne Slot wants to do. Will he want to sit back? If he wants to sit back and resign himself, his team to a low block and say, okay, guys, soak up the pressure, just play on the counter, I think that could serve them very well. I really do. I really do. It'll serve them very well, I think, because the way we play PSG, we push you into the final third. We're gonna push and push and push, and as a result, we're gonna leave spacing behind. That's the trade-off. We're okay with that because that's what football is about, right? You have to trade things off, but the space will be there. We'll see what happens. And also when you think about PSG, guys are getting back healthy. There's still Ruiz who might be fit. Mayulu is out, I think, and obviously Barcola is out as well. But this is a very healthy team, peaking at the right time of the season. Lens just took three to the face from Lille, so Liga isn't as big of a factor anymore as well. We can kind of start rotating a bit as long as we win our games in hand. Nothing's ever over. Like I said, football will surprise you. But when you look at it from that perspective, you'll say, okay, PSG, sure, they should win this easy, right? There's other factors to talk about, like, Safanov instead of Donnarumma. Donnarumma was very good at making sure, especially this last year's tie, Donnarumma, that at Anfield, that away tie at Anfield, bro, he was so good on the crosses and the set pieces. Like, he was knocking away damn near everything. And we did get lucky a few times. We got an offside at one point, and I think Kwanzaa hit the post. But he was very good otherwise. So when you talk about goalkeeper performances, I think Safanov is going to be key in making sure that, in the air, there's not as much threat. But I just think, and especially the way English teams play, they're resilient. Like, I just think by playing in the Premier League, you do get this resilience, right? I think Liverpool might have something for us. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw, Liverpool. All right, let's finish it off with Barcelona versus Atletico de Madrid. Love the Spanish accent. I be trying, man. But yeah, it's interesting with these teams because they faced off against each other 4 times already, right? And at that point, it's like, man, you know your opponent like the back of your hand. Like, man, you probably tired of facing these guys. But yeah, Barcelona ended up winning their most recent matchup, and they're 3 of their last 4 matchups, right? Because Barcelona won 3-1, I believe, at the Camp Nou earlier in the season, and then they obviously lost 4-0 at the Metropolitano in the Copa del Rey. Then they went back to the Camp Nou. Barcelona won 3-0, and then just now this past weekend they won 2-1 at the Metropolitano again in the league. So Barcelona realistically have Atleti's number just a bit, right? I feel like Atleti might have something for us, and I think when you look at that La Liga fixture this past weekend, Atleti did rotate, right? They started Bayern, they didn't play Lookman, they didn't play Alvarez, so they kind of rotated their star guys, right? So when I look at that, I think, okay, Atleti are definitely preparing something for this game. I think Simeone might have something. I really do. We'll see what happens though. I think when you have guys like Pedri and Yamal on the field, and it's just so hard to defend these guys who can create at will, and then Rashford and Lewandowski breathing down your neck. And I think Rashford has been such a great pickup, especially now that Rafinha's injured. Having Rashford to come fill that in for you is incredible because now it feels like Barcelona haven't missed much of a beat. It's not quite necessarily the same team because Rafinha is just that explosive, but Rashford is a very, very good option to have. Probably the best option in Europe, right? So it's a tough game to call for me. But also they're at the Camp Nou. I think that plays a part in it. And Atleti do not win at the Camp Nou, right? So I think Barca should be winning this tie, at the very least this first leg. You know, there's also questions of, okay, Barcelona still have this high line. Atleti know it now for sure, right? I remember Griezmann had a very good chance in that league game and he missed it. But you can imagine more opportunities like that if Lookman is there, who's just a little bit younger, and not to say Griezmann's bad, but right? If Lookman's in that position, maybe he scores, maybe, right? Or if Alvarez in that position, maybe Alvarez scores. Like it's these things that I think where the Atleti attackers are so used to this Barca high line, they're gonna be able to see, how to time their runs, and they're just gonna know, right? So we'll see how it looks like, but I do think that's a big worry for Barcelona, because they're susceptible to goals, and I think when you're talking about this first leg and the tie in general, okay, Barcelona I think will win. But if it's only a 2-1, if I'm at Atleti, I don't feel out of it at all. Even if it's 3-1, because you can beat this team by 4, right? On the other hand, this team has beaten you by 2, by 1, and by 3. So who knows? But it's it's there. It's there for Atleti if they want it. I really do think it's there for Atleti. I think they have enough means to do it, and especially with it being Griezmann's last season. Now he's going to Orlando in the summer. I feel like that might play a role. It's a little something extra, and obviously Atleti are also in the Copa del Rey final. So if they get knocked out here, they still have a trophy to compete for at least. But yeah, I think for this first game, Atleti will try very hard. There'll be opportunities, but at the end of the day, Barcelona will. They just don't. Atleti just don't win at Camp Nou. So Barcelona will take home the win, and they'll go into the second leg with the advantage. But yeah, those are my predictions. So I mean, those are tough. I would love to see PSG win. I think that's the one prediction I'm a little bit scared or hesitant about, just because I could see Liverpool winning that game. I could see PSG winning that game. I could see it being a draw. Like it's tough to call. I think Bayern should be smoking Real Madrid. Same with Arsenal over Sporting. Barca Atleti will be tight as well, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. My voice is breaking now, so let me head out of here as I'm tripping over my words. But thank you guys again so much for watching. It's been your boy, Ollie Footy. Peace.